So welcome to today's podcast. Thanks for joining me as always. This is your host, Tom Savantry for the Perennial Pride podcast. And, I really appreciate you guys joining and hopefully bringing you tremendous value. So today's topic is something that's near and dear to my heart now, being in the world of a solopreneur, right? Trying to pave my own path, right? There's more and more people like me, and you might be one of them, that's going out on their own, right? Whether it's transitioning from a prior job and you're now venturing off in your own world of bringing your purpose, passion, and talents to the world in some unique way to serve our world in your unique and divine way and pushing forward with that. And that's a scary thing for a lot of people, and me included. I know what it's like. And more people are doing it, whether young, old, or transitioning. I saw this one stat, which was absolutely shocking to me for 2025. And so it said there was an estimated 41.8 million solopreneurs in the US, which represents over 80% of small businesses. So essentially they're run by one person, and hopefully they grow over time. But it shows you we have massive opportunity in this world today to be able to do that, to be a business owner, entrepreneur, and build our own path and not just rely on a job. Not to say there's anything wrong with that. However, you could do both, right? And I think that's where a lot of people are going, and then they can transition off into their own sort of business and as they start seeing success, which I would highly recommend making that. And that's kind of what I did personally to sort of hedge my bets around what was happening and ensure that transition was as smooth as possible and less impactful on my life and certainly my family. And so it's a really big area of growth in this country of solopreneurs. And there's a lot of things that trying to act like a business owner, there's some things that being a solopreneur, you may not even sort of appreciate, especially depending on where you are in your life cycle of your business. And something hit me more recently, close to home, that sort of spurred this podcast was, someone I had known for many years, dealing with him in areas of real estate investments and such. I got to know him and become friends with him, and he spent most of his life as in the public sector, working for the city in a different way, and then over time started building his side business in real estate consulting, and over time it was starting to thrive. And then as he exited his retirement from the city, he went to pursue this new business at full time, right, as his purpose to help, obviously those who are looking to, purchase and buy their dream home, but maybe don't have all the resources to do it, but also really transform how the buying process worked. And something that he was very passionate about, to streamline, make it easier and such, and help those that just couldn't maybe afford maybe their dream home. And, this is a path he went down and starting to build momentum. And, just like any business, really, it evolved over time and shaped in terms of the focus. And really, I think he was ready to sort of press the gas. You've seen success, and really investors are starting to see the light too and support his business. And then all of a sudden, in a quick matter of time, he started experiencing health issues, some of it eye-related, like cataracts, and then it spiraled into a detached retinas on both eyes, and really put him in a world of being incapacitated for a significant amount of time in the foreseeable future. And something that hit very, very quickly, and exactly the time frame, it was a very short time. And from that, I got a message more recently from him indicating that, given the turn of events in his life, that he now needed to basically shut down this business, liquidate assets, and pay investors back and debt and such. And something that he was super passionate about, saw a big vision. He was a young man, right? His life looking to contribute even more than he already is, and now he had to basically shut down the business and go a different direction based on that. And, you never know when those things will happen, whether death, disability, whatever circumstances that may derail you. But as a solopreneur, then are you prepared for that? Is it going to result in exactly that same thing? You just need to shut things down. It was just a job, and you move on from there. And for a lot of people who are building their business, it's a hope that someday they can build an asset up and maybe sell it. But one is preparing to for that possibility, right? And then building your business in such a way that it could be sellable or taken over if something happened to you, is something that probably most people have not prepared adequately for. So today I want to just cover some basic sort of things for you to think about if this is your situation or you're contemplating, right, starting your own business down the road. And as you're building your business, maybe start to think about these things in a little bit more depth so you can prepare and sort of be able to weather these types of storms that sometimes hit us when we least expect it. So step one, what I would consider is more foundational. It's, as you're building your business, you've seen some success, is essentially protecting what you have, right? And it starts with some fundamental things. One, right, you're a business, so you kind of have to act that way, right? And one is having the right legal structures in place, whether you're LLC and it could be, for example, taxed as an S corp. And there's a lot of different options for you to choose from, but most people will at least have an LLC or something so they can separate the business activities and the liabilities that come with that from their personal lives. We get so used to that being sort of just how we live. And so now even if you're operating by yourself, you kind of have to act like a business, right? As a business owner, right? And that means structuring it in a way that is aligned to being a business owner and then protects obviously the assets within that business and separates it from your personal life. And we know, from a tax and financial perspective, we get treated as the same, but there's still an entity and structure that sort of keeps some separation to it so that you can protect assets on both sides. The second thing in this sort of maybe legal structure, documentation sort of world is documentation. It's not the sexiest part of business is, if you have contracts, keeping those contracts available, right, to be able to reference. If there's agreements between clients, having them readily available for other people to maybe be able to access or review if needed, if you're not able to do that. And that goes with anything, maybe if you have vendor agreements, all those sort of things that tie you to different clients or vendors or others and business arrangements that you're making, like those things are all readily available so that someone could act on your behalf or access them as needed. These are things that could be very important down the line. Now, kind of align with the sort of liability side is having some financial safeguards in place. One being you can't commingle your assets, right, with personal accounts. Like have business accounts set up tied to your entity structure, right? So it keeps them separate, your income expenses. So you're not commingling, right? So you want to make sure that that's solid so you operate like a business. It's separate than your personal life. So your financial account should be set up in that manner. And obviously record keeping is big. So, in the systems that run your business, right, having that flow or document in some fashion will be very important, not only for people who could take over, but, obviously we know that, if there was a possibility down the road to sell this business, that you want easily transferable in terms of how you do it and how you operate and what's maybe something you've created that's unique to you in your business that's hugely valuable. Having that fully documented so you can transfer from one to follow and or sort of transfer it to someone else to take over will be hugely impactful and make your business definitely protected and, potentially more valuable for someone looking at it to purchase down the road. And some of these things are also very basic things, right? You may have access to systems and tools and such, but who else could access them? The passwords, right? Where are they located? Do you have an assistant? Do you have some way, a password protected environment that someone could access if needed to be able to go into accounts and operate on your behalf and be able to function like you as a solopreneur in case you're unable to. And I've heard this before too, whether it's even personal life, is, have a little one pager of who are the main contacts and information accounts that someone could sort of use as a reference point to try to replicate what you do in your business, right? How can you give them the keys to some degree to be able to operate at least somewhat on your behalf if you're not available? So getting access to all those tools and such and the processes and systems that you are using will be hugely important to be able to make that transfer. So that's it from a foundational financial sort of kind of systems and processes standpoint. Would be highly beneficial as you're maturing in your business. So step 2 kind of gets into building like a succession vision. And I think some of these things requires you to step back from a moment and sort of just ask yourself some questions to help sort of flesh this out. And something as basic as if I couldn't work tomorrow, who would take over? Would it be a spouse, a family member, someone who's in your field? I mean, thinking through that a bit, or do you just literally shut down, right? Is there someone that could take over that has your level of expertise, or at least knows how you operate to be able to fill in your shoes? So asking that question, like, what if you had somebody, whether it's your spouse, what would they really need to know? What would they be trained on? What access to things would they need to have to be able to function properly? And could you train them in preparation for it, right? To plan for it. And, that's why you go through that cycle of questioning to think through, like, who could really do this? Who would want to do it? And how can you train that person, prepare them so that they know where to go and what to do in the unfortunate scenario where you're no longer functioning, or you've passed, or in this scenario that I started this podcast with, like, you're just incapacitated. You're around functioning mentally, but you just physically can't be there, right? How can I train someone ahead of time so they could take over? And certainly documenting kind of your big steps and what that transition would look like would be hugely beneficial to have ready at hand, so that, someone who comes in has the plan already laid out of where everything is and how to operate. And, obviously that would take a lot of time and energy, but anyone who's maybe taking over this business someday, right, and wanting to buy this would probably want to know that, right, as an asset, right? It makes it more valuable. And I know systems and tools and such would be helpful for that, for someone buying, so they know you're ready and they can easily take over. Now, here's something that I think for people who are in like partnership or business have more familiarity to, but for a solopreneur, it's something to consider, right? It's if you ever heard a concept of a buy-sell agreement, and they can be valuable even if you don't have a partner. And I've talked to some business attorneys where they know this is a big gap that they see across the board, and there's ways to structure it legally, right? Even if you don't have a partner. And so one of the things that you can set up are these sort of contingent buy-sell agreements with someone outside your business. They could be, a trusted person in your industry that you connect with, have a good relationship with, and you trust, that could sort of step in your role. It could be, a competitor who you know well enough, and who might want to acquire your business in some capacity, right? Or maybe it's not your spouse, but maybe it's other family member that you think is capable and would like to take over someday if it came to be that you're not able to. So you can create a written agreement of what happens if you died or become disabled, right? How your business would be valued. That's usually the biggest thing. Like, what would be that pricing model that says this is what the value of my business is, and then set up a structure of, okay, how would you pay for it, right? What contingencies do I have in place? And a lot of folks within certain buy-sell agreements, they use life insurance or disability insurance policies and such to be able to help people fund the purchase of your interest and your assets. And so it's important to consider that same sort of functionality so that you can preserve the value of your asset, and then someone has the capability to come in and even afford to buy you out. And then your family could sort of benefit from the asset you've built in your business. So it's really important because, it's easily taken for granted. feel like you're solo and there's no value. But as you're building your business or practice up, there's a lot of things you've probably created that can be hugely valuable. And this is to help also client relationships, and like we talked about before, vendors, and making sure they're taken care of. Anyone's in the ecosystem can really benefit from having this sort of structure in place, that someone's going to take over, and there's somewhat of a buy-sell sort of agreement or contingency plan in place. And so you can have each other sign, and you can kind of go both ways, right? Imagine you're working with somebody else who's in the same field or same business, that you can have that on each other, so it protects both sides, right? And so you can kind of work, even though you might be competitors and sort of the market, recognizing that you could coexist. What if you set something up and say, hey, let's protect each other and ensure that our clients and vendors and the way people we serve are also protected along the way by setting something up. So just something to consider as you're kind of moving through this. The last sort of part of this is really, I think, more of a mindset thing. I think sometimes it's, you go through the details and you think, oh God, this is going to be painful to get this thing set up, and what's it going to cost, all those things, which is, they're legitimate questions for sure. But for someone who's a solopreneur, you might be feeling you're not big enough, right? You're not established enough. What's the purpose of this sort of succession planning? But really, when you get into this, and this is a mindset shift, and I know it's for many it can be challenging, is you haven't started this business to recreate a job, right? It might feel that way, and it might be structured in that manner. And this is incumbent upon all of us who are in this situation to start thinking like a business owner, right? Because you might down the road start having employees, or to that point, you might start expanding. And so acting in this manner helps you think through, like, as a business owner, and secondarily thinking about it, like what would need to be set up and for your business that someone would be attracted to buy it, right? And that takes some time and energy of not working in the business, but obviously that concept of working on the business, right? As the more director of what's happening, instead of always just doing the work, which is a common thing. And it's something that people, certainly in the solopreneur world, can struggle with. So this is really about protecting something that you're building, a tremendous asset. And so you have to treat it that way. And this is just a slight mindset shift. It isn't just recreating a job. Now, if that's your aspiration, then it's fine. It's just for those who are looking to build something, you almost have to treat it very differently than if you had a job, and sort of put in place the thinking and thoughts and planning in that potential end in mind if you ever want to sell, or if you were forced to sell. In the case of what we're talking about in this episode, is something happens to you and you can't operate it anymore, right? So is your asset turned to zero, or would you want it to be valuable for you, your family, and legacy down the road? So I hope this was a helpful episode that at least get you thinking about these things. You may not be at that state right now in your business where you've built it up enough that it would be valuable, but the hope is that it is, and allow you to hopefully think expansively about, what if I grew this thing into something? How could I make it sellable and valuable to somebody else who would want to buy it? And so for you, I would suggest this as a quick summary, and certainly listen to this again, is, just start sort of thinking about it, right? The questioning around this, and just writing it down. What would happen if you couldn't operate this thing tomorrow, right? What would happen, right? Who could step in, right? Kind of going through that sort of brainstorming exercise to realize that maybe there's more options out there than you believe or know about, and taking the time and energy just to explore it a little bit further. Create a guide. Second thing I'd suggest is maybe just creating a little guide of kind of key things, like of your passwords, your client list, whatever it is, your basic processes that are kind of form and shape your business. If someone were to have to walk in and look at it, like, at least they have some of the fundamentals around what's happening in your business to at least start that as a kind of one-page guide or starting point. And lastly, which I'm a big proponent of these things, like, yeah, chat's great and you can do these things, but sometimes you do need an advisor, whether go to a legal advisor or accountant or financial advisors to explore like ways you can protect your asset and sort of further plan some sort of basic succession plan to at least to move the ball forward. You may not have to solve the whole thing immediately and right off the first shot, but at least getting that momentum to have some of the basics in place, your legal structure, those sorts of things, the protections in place, whether through liability or death, disability, those sorts of things. At least you can have those in place and start building off of those over time. So, if you have aspirations for your business to grow to something larger and more meaningful and an asset that could be significant, it's something that I think is important enough for you to at least explore. So I hope this episode was helpful for you, and for those who are in solopreneur businesses and looking to get into it. I think taking some of these steps really protect what you're building and really make sure it benefits you and your family for generations to come. So thanks for joining me, and we'll see you on the next episode of the Perennial Pride podcast.
Thanks for joining me on this episode today. I really am grateful for you as listeners to the Perennial Pride podcast. I hope you're getting some tremendous value out of it and hopefully pushing you along your journey to financial freedom. I put this podcast together really to help you get more educated around your finances so that you feel empowered to live the life that you really want. And if you like the content that you heard today or watched, then I would encourage you to go to my website, perennialpride.com. There's tons of other content there. And you can access my book, Wealth Beyond the Numbers. You can buy it there on my website. It's a aggregation of a lot of great tips and tools I've learned to not only build my wealth in my accounts, but build wealth in my life and abundance and joy, and something that has a lot of my experiences in the journey that I've been on personally. Hopefully that can be also of value to you as you sort of move forward. So thanks again for being a Perennial Pride listener, and we'll see you on the next episode.